This question comes from Tina in Huntington Beach, California. How could Senator Schumer's plan to sell homes to foreign investors in exchange for a visa change the housing market for average middle-class Americans? My husband and I are waiting to buy our first house here in Orange County, California. When would you buy, or would you?
Well, anything that we do to try to entice foreigners to buy properties here, to the extent that it works and more foreigners come into the market, then real estate prices will be higher than they otherwise would have been absent that foreign buying. Whether this is good or bad depends on your perspective. Now, from the perspective of the person who asks this question, it's a bad thing because now it means that you have to compete with those foreign buyers. Theoretically, if the house that you're looking at is one that might appeal to a foreigner, you have more bidders. So from a buyer's perspective, it makes real estate prices higher than they otherwise would be. And so you end up paying more. So that's not a good thing. But of course, if you're trying to sell your house, anything the U.S. government does to encourage additional buyers is going to help you get a higher price than you otherwise would have got. The question is it better to encourage foreigners to buy properties here rather than allow those properties to be bought up by Americans who are already here and may spend a lot more of their time in the United States? I mean, personally, I think it's fine if we make it easier for foreigners to have property in the United States, because I think if we get a wealthy foreigner to buy a piece of property and they rent it out and they take care of it, I've got no problem with that. So this might actually not be a bad idea from the point of view of housing policy. If we have too many houses, at least if you're trying to reduce the supply on the market, it makes a lot more sense than what Alan Greenspan wants to do, which is just burn them to the ground. At least this way the house is still here, and even if a foreigner buys it temporarily, he may sell it eventually. The house is still here, and if he's not going to live in it, at least it's going to be on the rental market. If you burn it down, it's nowhere, and of course the foreigners are going to pay taxes on the property, so they're going to pay property taxes. So that might be one of the things that the government is doing that I actually wouldn't object to when it comes to housing policy.
Umesh in San Jose, California asks, with the Federal Reserve approving dumping higher-risk assets into the deposit bank side of their banking business, which is backed by FDIC, how will this impact taxpayers?
Well, anytime the banks are allowed to have higher risk assets on their books backing up federally insured deposits, it increases the risk that there's a loss. And who picks up the loss? Well, the taxpayer, because ultimately the taxpayer stands behind the FDIC, either with their tax dollars or, if there are no tax dollars, with inflation, because if the Federal Reserve has to print money to bail out the banks that loaded up on risky assets, then it's American citizens who suffer because they lose purchasing power, because the extra money that the Fed creates to bail out the banks, to make good the depositors, comes at the expense of the loss of value of those deposits, or any deposits, or any money anywhere, even the dollars that people have in their mattresses. So it is the wrong thing to do, but it probably is an expedient thing to do because the Fed is trying to kick the can down the road. Unfortunately, they end up kicking a can right at the American taxpayer, who's going to have to fill it up with money.